Hey, y'all. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Royce, Executive Director of Annie's List. I'm excited to be here virtually with all of you and really looking forward to talking with our special guest, LaTosha Brown. But first, and for those of you who may be new, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Annie's List and the work we do. Since our founding, Annie's List has elected more than 160 progressive women all across Texas, trained thousands more, and invested over $20 million to build women's political power. Right now, while we navigate a global pandemic, Annie's List continues to grow and to adapt. And despite the challenges we faced, we made a lot of progress last cycle. We re-elected 24 of 25 legislative incumbents. We trained over 450 progressive women and campaign staff. And we had more than 1,800 people tune in to our virtual conversation series and fall events. Because of your dedication and belief in Annie's List, we were able to build on our mission in 2020. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of you joining us today, and especially to our host committee, whose support makes everything we do possible, and so that we can continue to build on our successes in 2021. We have to continue to do this work because we know how vital it is and what women leaders can bring to the table when given the resources to run and win. And with every election, we're getting closer to making Texas blue and to reaching gender parity, despite Republicans actively working to suppress our right to vote. Y'all, we can't let them silence us. And thankfully, we have an expert with us today who can talk about keeping up our fight. I am so proud to be joined by LaTosha Brown today. LaTosha is an award-winning, visionary thought leader, institution builder, cultural activist and artist, and connector. She is a nationally recognized go-to expert in Black voting rights and voter suppression, Black women's empowerment, and philanthropy. She's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter, the Black Voters Matter Fund, and Black Voters Matter Capacity Building Institute. She works to boost Black voter registration and turnout, as well as increase power in marginalized, predominantly Black communities. LaTosha is also the visionary and founder of a regional network called the Southern Black Girls and Women's Consortium. She's received numerous awards and accolades for her work and has been featured on ABC, CBS, CNN, Democracy Now!, and PBS. And her op-eds have been showcased in the New York Times, Politico, and Essence. LaTosha, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and work. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this conversation with you. And, I don't know about you, but everybody's looking at Texas now. I care about what happens in Texas. So really happy to be a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you for saying so. We do think that what happens in Texas really has implications for the whole rest of the country. So let's dive in. You have been an organizer for quite some time. You've helped so many people and communities own their power. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey and how you came to this work?
Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on.
Yes, ma'am.
That is a song from the Civil Rights Movement. I am actually, while I live in Georgia, I'm actually a native of Selma, Alabama. And when I think about kind of what brought me to this work is really my journey and my experience as a Black woman growing up in the Deep South and literally spending my time around people who were in the movement, hearing the stories about the movement, and kind of growing up, going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge every day of my life. And so even as a child, there are two things I always talk about. There's a running joke in my family. Was a running joke in my family around two things. One, I always had this obsession with knowing who was the owner of things, and so my grandmother and I would go. We would go to Dairy Queen. We would go to the mall. We would get on the bus, and I was like, and I called her mom. I was like, "Mama, who owns the bus?" And she was like, "I mean, the bus company. I don't know." And I was like, "Well, okay, Mama." We would go into Kmart. I was like, "Mama, who owns Kmart?" Anywhere we went, I had this idea that I wanted to know who owned things, right? And I realized it was part of, as I've gotten older now, it was part of, I always was intrigued by knowing who had the power, had decision making power. And even
Right.
to this day, it's really interesting when I go into spaces, I'm constantly looking. Nine times, it was actually like a test for me, like in when I was in college, where I would go with my friends and I could always go and say, that's the owner, or that's the person in charge. There was something about leadership and who was in charge that I was interested in. And then the second thing is I always had I never could stand bullies, right? Even as the little skinny girl in school, if the boys picked on a weaker boy, I was the girl to jump in the fight, right?
Right.
Because
That's not right.
right, I never could stand to see people abuse their power. So I guess I've always had kind of these dual pieces that have been pulling me in life, these values around what is power and how people abuse their power, but how you could also use your power to help prevent others from having pain or being in pain. And so a lot of that kind of led, I think, that been the shaping of kind of my foundation of my work. And then as I got older, in my 20s, I started doing youth organizing in Selma. I was doing my first organizing was in the residence council for the public housing there locally, and then I started doing youth organizing and each step along the way, I tell people I organize people, I organize money, I organize ideas. That my entire life trajectory has been in terms of organizing those three paths. And that's part of it's because I never remember ever in my life where I did not want to be a person who had impact. I just always thought that, part of the reason why human beings were created was for us to have impact. And so it was really this deep, deep sense of wanting to stop injustice. I just didn't like to see bullies. I didn't want to stop injustice, and really being able to use power in a way to actually minimize the pain. And for people, I'm always been a big, big love bug. I'm a big love bug. I want the whole world to feel love. I want to create and generate as much love as possible. So all of my work, even the work that I do in terms of voting, it is fundamentally centered around this notion around I want to generate love, as much love as possible in the world. I fundamentally believe that that is what is going to transform the world. That if we really operate and stand in this space of love, then what we'll see poverty won't exist anymore. We won't see pain exist in the same way that it exists anymore. We won't see war. All of those elements that we've inflicted pain, I think, are elements that we've disconnected ourselves away from the idea of love. And so all of my work is really, I'm a big love bug centered in this notion that, we can lead work that actually centers this notion of for the love of humanity, that everything that we're doing is advancing humanity forward.
That is so powerful. And, we talk to a lot of women who are running for office or thinking about running for office, or are just trying to figure out exactly what you said, how to make an impact, how to make a difference. They see something wrong, they see bullies, and oftentimes they don't know how to go about making the change. They just have a feeling that that's what they want to do. And so thinking about that and thinking about Black Voters Matter, and sort of your theory of change, can you talk a bit about how you came to this voting rights space as the mode right now of creating the change you're trying to see?
You know, it's really interesting. I tell folks, believe it or not, while most of the time when you're hearing me talk, or if I'm on TV, or I'm often talking about democracy. I think fundamentally what we have to do is protect and save democracy. And I do, but believe it or not, that's not my end goal. I don't do this work because of democracy. I do this work because of the love of humanity. That fundamentally what I believe, and I think that women, even women that are running for office, we have to be different. If we're not going to be different, I mean, we don't need to be we don't need to take on the same kind of value system of our male counterparts. I mean, the only difference, what, we're gonna have breasts? I mean, ultimately, right? Ultimately, I think what women, you know, there's something about, you know, I'm thinking about my grandbaby who I was sharing that I just put to sleep. You know, I was thinking about, you know, when you let another human being take over your body for almost a year, like there's something about being mothers and being women in our community that we're responsible for. Like there's that, it's almost like we're prepared to serve other people, right? And so, but in many ways, that has been that's been used as a negative against us. It's been used as a vehicle to try to marginalize our power and marginalize our voices. It's been used as a way of people exploiting that. When in fact, I actually think we should lean into it. But we lean into it in our terms. That the bottom line is, I am grateful to serve humanity. I am grateful to serve others, but in my terms. And I think that women, you know, who are running for office, who are considering office, that we should take our femininity with us. We don't separate from it, we lean into it. I remember my first time that I ran for office. I ran for State Board of Education, and I changed my colors, my initial colors. I wanted something to go with brown because my last name is Brown, and I wanted people, I was a political unknown. Nobody knew me. I was 28 years old. I was a single mother. I was the checklist of what every probably political consultant would say. I was not electable, right? And so, had never run for office, never raised any money, anything like that, other than I had been an organizer. My benefit was that I was an organizer. And so I decided that I wanted to, and it was interesting. I was running against a man. And the second time I ran, it was interesting. I think I ran in a field of 14. They were all men. I was the only woman.
Wow.
And so what was interesting is instead of pulling back from that, I leaned into it. So I decided that my colors were going to be pink and brown. Now, my mentor, who was a senator, almost had a heart attack. He was like, "Your signs are pink." I was like, "I know, aren't they pretty?" And he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you got pink signs." I was like, "People are going to remember them." And they did. So instead of me moving away from being a woman and literally trying to like let me blend into, because at the time, this was in the late 90s, you know, to blend into what was the traditional candidate, I was okay. I had hot pink signs with brown. All of my t-shirts were hot pink. I had men all over the city wearing hot pink shirts. I was literally going into barbershops. I went directly into barbershops and beauty shops, and I had a hot pink chair with big flowers, big, obnoxious, beautiful flowers. And so I would go in, I was like, "Put me on a hot seat in a hot pink suit," right? You know, I probably bought every hot pink suit you could find between here and from Atlanta to New York. And literally, because I stood in it, you know, and it was interesting because that was one of the first times in my life I had experienced sexism, that there were churches. I had never experienced sexism or had been aware of it in that way. You know, I grew up in the Black church, and so I had gone to churches to speak, and they would not let me to speak. At the podium, they said, because I was a woman. Can you believe that? Like, I was like, "What do you mean?" And my opponent, they was like, "Well, he's a man. We don't let women speak in the diocese," which I was like, this is 1998. I don't understand. And so that is funny because that actually happened to me again 2 years ago. But the bottom line is, I'm raising that story and giving the details of that story is, instead of running away from my feminine energy. I used it as my superpower. And as a result, what happened is I stood out from the crowd. That I took the very thing that was actually being used against me is I used the fact that I was a young mother, that I was like, the best place for a woman is in the house, is in the state house, send me, right? And so I had this whole thing about the best place for a woman is in the house. And people loved it. My point I'm raising that is my point is that we can actually, I think as women candidates who are thinking about running, I think there are three things you should consider. The first thing is we should consider what is what's our authentic voice. Not what everybody else wants us to say. What is your authentic voice that actually distinguishes you, right? So that you're literally in alignment with the values of your community. You're in alignment with the values that you hold. And I have this thing about people that just jump up and run for office without literally consulting community. I actually think that your community, if you are trying to convince your community to run and there's not anybody in your community that's really trying to convince you to run, that might mean that you probably should do some organizing. And the reason why I said this is that I think it's really important. Yes, there are people that don't know you, but you should always, the way that you develop your authentic voice is by listening and building those relationships. And if you're building those relationships and you show up, people know a leader. They automatically, folks will start asking you to run. And I don't think you wait until people ask you to run. I think the goal is to be in alignment so that it's not just you out here by yourself, but you and your community have made a collective decision that you should actually seek public office because you can represent that district. The second thing that I'll say that I think is really important is that we really have a vision that I think women have to shift this up. If we're going to get in office and serve and have the same way that our male counterparts, what difference has it made? We're going to have to be bold. We're going to have to say, I say it. I was like, yes, it's about love. Yes, I own it. I say it. I stand for it. Right. It's about family. Yes, I own it. I stand for it. It's about children. I own it. I stand for it. And literally, if we're shifting the discourse, then we're actually shifting the political landscape. And so we also have to see that the change doesn't happen just once you're in office, that you can actually have measurable, impactful change. I remember in my campaigns when I ran that my opponent started sounding like me. At first I was a little upset about it. I was like, that's what I said. And I remember my mentor said, that is a form of flattery. The bottom line is you're changing the value system even in this race. You're shifting because people can no longer run away from it. They actually have to now adopt some of your ideas that they weren't thinking about before to make themselves competitive. And ultimately, isn't that what we want? Ultimately, what we want is change for people, right? And so literally, I changed the discourse in that race by literally being bold enough to put it. And so I'll just say for the women, that's the second thing. And the third thing is women have to support women. That's just the truth. If we're in a patriarchy society, which we are, right, that we have to literally support women. We have to encourage women to run around us. We have to actually look up, and sometimes we are, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? That oftentimes we'll hold a standard for a woman candidate much different than, women can mess up just like the men can mess up. It's okay, y'all, right? And I'm saying that because I think it's really important for us to give some grace and space for each other, that as we are supporting women running for office, that we're nurturing them, we're talking to them, we're building a community around them so that there is some sense of accountability, but we're also offering some grace and space to each other in this space. Because I think that if we're going to see women run for office, we're going to have to propel them. We're going to have to propel by writing checks, giving them resources, helping to be surrounding them around giving them advisory support and consultation. And then 3, help them really be able to develop their collective voice in terms of so that it's not just them running as a candidate, but their candidacy absolutely represents a larger body. Just like as women, oftentimes, we don't just show up as an individual. We show up thinking about our kids, our husband. We're like, oh, wait a minute. I need this. Oftentimes when we would go, if you go to an event and you're getting food, most of the women will lead with maybe with several plates, because you're not just thinking about, I ate my food, you're taking food back to your family. Because when we walk in the spaces, we think about the others that we have responsibilities to take care of. And I think we should also take that same kind of value system in the space when we're running for office.
That is so, thank you for that. That's so rich what you just said. You know, the distinction that people draw between sort of um, power and service, or leadership and service, right? When uh, in an ideal world, those are not different things. Those are the same thing, right? And the ways in which, um, as women, as Black women, as women of color, we have the chance to bring a different vision, a different style, a different set of priorities into a leadership space. Um, you know, and things that seem like weaknesses, or things that we are constantly told are weaknesses, um, are actually strengths. And the reason that we know that they are strengths is by how hard some people fight to silence or stop us from exercising those aspects, right?
Abs- Absolutely. Absolutely. And
And
they're weaponized against us. You know, it's so
exactly.
interesting. Like I know all the women who are listening to this, you've heard, well, you're too emotional. Yeah, I actually broke up with a guy one time because he said I was emotional. And it was funny because I was thinking to myself, and he got upset with me because I was like, well, didn't you just get in a fight with somebody? Like, I remember I was in college. I was like, well, I think that's pretty emotional. You almost went to jail. Like, you got in the fight because you and some guy, it was like a college brawl or something, right? And I was like, I think men are pretty emotional, right? And so the
You
bottom
know,
line,
I cannot confirm nor deny that I have had similar experiences. So yeah, absolutely.
right? Like we have to like not allow, we have to own who we are, women. We have to own who we are and that power and all the beauty that goes along with that. And we have to lead from that perspective. That's what gives us our advantage. That in itself, I really do believe that leading from a feminist perspective in itself is a disruptor, that it disrupts what already exists and it gives us space, it opens up space for others to really be able to lead and really see leadership very differently.
Absolutely. And you know, let's talk a little bit about what you just called weaponization, or the links to which people will go to silence women leaders, and Black women in particular. Texas has the largest Black population in the country. And just recently here, we had a Republican committee chairman refuse to allow one of our legislative champions, State Rep Nicole Collier of my hometown of Fort Worth, a Black woman, to ask questions at a hearing for House Bill 6, which is just this awful voter suppression bill aimed to strip local governments of their ability to institute common sense voter access initiatives. And this chairman's actions led to the hearing ending abruptly. Not only did Rep. Collier not get to speak, but over 100 Texans who had arrived to give testimony at the Capitol were unable to do so. In Georgia, we saw just recently that State Rep. Park Cannon was arrested for trying to fight voter suppression bill SB 202. What do you say when these women are standing up to fight against bills that are clearly designed to silence us? You know, should we be surprised that this is happening? I feel like I know your answer to that, but what do you say about what we're seeing with these bills and the um, deliberate silencing of Black women around them?
Let me say this, we are making progress. It's hard. Let me just share a kind of a short experience that I had the other day. As I was on the day in which the voter suppression bills passed in Georgia, I was on my way driving. And I didn't really think I had an emotional reaction to it at all. I was on my way driving and I felt my face warm, and I realized I was crying. I wasn't even I wasn't even really fully aware. I think I was so angry and upset and so in my thoughts that I was crying. And so there, I had like warm tears. So I know I must have been really mad because I was like, they were warm tears going down my face. And so when I pulled up to the protest right across the street from the state capitol, and the vote was going down during this time, it was about an hour before the vote. I looked out and I saw a Black woman on the megaphone. I saw a group of about 150 people. I saw Asians, Asian Americans. I saw white people. I saw Black folks. I saw someone on a walker in a wheelchair. I saw young people. I saw a mother with her child. And I thought to myself, this is it. We're actually went. This is America. This is it. And I can't even tell you, like all of a sudden, like it was almost like a cloud had lifted and I had so much enormous hope. I was like, if this is the thing that actually gives us the push we need to come together in a unified way to build a multinational, multi-generational, multi-ethnic coalition to stand together singing and having messages of no voter suppression, love and power and unity. If this is the thing that ushers in that opportunity, then I'm all for it, because the bottom line is Jim Crow has always existed. Like this attack on Black women and Black women bodies and us not speaking it, they found all kinds of interesting ways to do it. Now it's in the open. Part of the reason why it's in the open, because they have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to hide. And so, it is so blatant. My point is, when it comes to the surface, you can deal with it, right? It's coming to the surface, and I think we're uprooting it. It's not that in any way am I saying that is a good thing that these things are happening, because they're hurtful, they're harmful. They create, they come out of a very negative space. What I am saying is that it gives us an opportunity to radically reimagine how to recreate this nation and our states. The truth of the matter is Texas is on the precipice of shifting and becoming one of the states that actually had the largest minority population in the country. Like Texas is, if you're gonna do it big, right? When you want to start in Texas,
everything's bigger in Texas,
right? Everything's bigger in Texas, right? And so anytime, we have to think about it. Like the darkest part of night is right before the dawn. One of my colleagues was talking about that earlier, that oftentimes, even when we think about the birthing process, labor ain't fun, right? The most difficult part of the labor is before the birthing. And so I'm raising this because I actually believe that we have to shift our perspective of how we see what's happening. Yes, it is negative, it is wrong, it is racist, it is sexist, what we're actually seeing in the Capitol. What we do have control over, though, we can't control them. What we can control, though, is we can control ourselves and our power and concentrate our power and actually use it as an opportunity to organize even greater. That's what we did in Georgia. In Georgia in 2018, this was ground zero for voter suppression. What happened? They thought that voter suppression was going to actually it's designed for people to really be able to disengage from the process. Not only did we not disengage, we came back fivefold. Like we came out and we made history. We took the pain and allowed the pain to propel us to build on an agenda to go forward. And I'm saying that even what happened recently in Texas, yes, we are enraged by it. We're enraged by what happened in Georgia, but we are also not going to let that be the thing that actually depresses us. We're going to actually let that be the thing that the hill from which we stand. We're going to use that power. We're going to use that incident to educate our communities, to say, did y'all know this is happening? Did you know why this happened? There was 100 people, and then we're going to come back. Next time we're going to come back, we're going to have 1,000 people in line. And the next time, 2,000 in line. My point is, we are literally I mean, I think once again, I think that's the gift of a woman. I've always been amazed at my aunt that she can just go to the refrigerator and like, if I'm going to do a meal, I kind of got to plan it out and I got to think about what I'm going to eat. Like, I just go to her house and she was just like, "Oh, I'll fix a meal." And I'm thinking to myself, well, does she know what she has? She doesn't need to. She has this canning ability to take whatever it is in there, right? And by the time she gives it to you, it's like, it's brilliant and it's beautiful and it's delicious, right? She has this ability to take what is, right, and make a masterpiece out of it. And so I'll just say this, Royce, that I think in these moments that we're seeing this overt racism and this overt sexism, we have to use the opportunity and even exploit those opportunities to organize, to go deeper, to actually encourage. There should be a woman running for every single office in Texas. Every single office should be challenged in Texas. A woman should run for it. We have to literally change the landscape. We have to change the expectation. We have to shift, the body politic. And the way that we do that is we do that when we show up in our presence, and we have to actually engage in a different kind of way. That's my belief.
Yes. Yes to all of that. I agree with you so strongly that one of the silver linings, I guess, of even this past election cycle where you saw voter suppression, bubbling up like it does, is people voted anyway, right? People do not like it when somebody tries to steal their voice, and people, it doesn't work, right? They keep trying it, but ultimately it won't work. And I do think, though, that it can be, really infuriating. Like you said, it's an outrage that this type of stuff keeps happening. And, some of our leaders, or I want to put leaders in air quotes, right, are out here just actively showing that they don't want us to vote, right? And it ties in to your point about democracy and who counts and who doesn't, who should count and who should not. And there are these quote unquote election integrity bills. This stuff is happening. It's not happening behind closed doors. It's happening just out here in public. And it's misinformation, right? Some might say lies. I'm going to go ahead and say lies about election integrity, about voter fraud, about whatever else that they can use to justify trying to silence people. How do we stop leaders who are intent on spreading misinformation, on lying to the public? How do we fight that?
The way we stop them is we replace them. The bottom line, there has to be consequences. And I know, I state that you all have Ted Cruz. I was like, woo, that's a lot, right? That's a lot, right? However, let me say this. I think we're in this real interesting moment. I think I grew up with a particular kind of faith and belief that everything happens for a reason, that nothing is just kind of just like happenstance, that everything is connected and that life is connected. I really believe that COVID came, that there's a learning lesson for us to get out of COVID. Like, in many ways, COVID made us shut down. Like, we had to, literally everything shifted, right? I think that we're in this transition moment. I am hoping that we don't miss this moment, that we really understand this moment that we're in right now. Until the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain to change, people will never change. And so this discomfort that we're feeling right now, we've got to use the energy of this discomfort to actually make a quantum leap forward. We can't just allow ourselves to respond to what those group of people who are liars, because I will say it, they're liars, right? Those people who are lying, those people who lack integrity, those folks who have undermined the democratic process, those folks who have been racist, those people who have held the possibility and the potential of the state back for all those years. Imagine what kind of state Texas has the ability to be if people in the state of Texas all felt honored and respected and valued, right? Just think about what that could be. The bottom line is we're not spending enough time thinking about that. I often ask people to close their eyes, and I say, my question to you, close your eyes, and then I ask the question, what would Texas look like if the Texans felt honored and valued and respected, right? What would the state look like? How would the healthcare system look? How would the education system look? What would the political landscape look like? I'm raising that because I do believe that if we don't have a vision of what we're trying to create that's different than what we already have, all we will do is continue to create and continue to be respond in this vicious cycle of, we got to continue. We only have to respond to what I think is the wickedness of others, that we only respond to the short-sightedness of others, that we only respond to the racism of others. Yes, we have to do that, but we also have to build. And so with the work with Black Voters Matter, we've decided twofold, that on one hand, yes, we are the first to get out there to fight voter suppression and to actually get out to register to vote and do all of those things that we have done for years to actually engage people in the process. But we're also having another conversation, a new conversation, that when we're talking to communities, we're talking to them, we're asking the question, what is power? What would power look like for your community? What would you like to see in your community? How do you think governance should happen? How can you radically reimagine? I'll just give it an example of it. Let's just think about work, the way that we work. And COVID brings this to mind to me. We all are in an unsustainable workforce. Let's just be honest about it. We are working ourselves to death. Literally, we are working so much in this country that we are killing our hearts. Think about this. We are literally, our hearts are attacking us because we're under so much stress. But isn't work supposed to be about livelihood? Instead, it's actually about, we're under this enormous stress that's killing us, right? That many people with COVID-19, when we were forcing our families, that many people realized that they didn't know their children. They had no clue of their children's learning style. They didn't even have patience with their children. Matter of fact, and this is all of us, so I'm not saying this about anything negative. We all had to go through this transition. There were many that we had to get to the place that we were like, oh my God, like our children, my work is so important that my work is priority. My children are in the way. What kind of culture have we created that says that our family is in the way and our work is the priority? What kind of culture have we created that we say I should work to the point that I have high blood pressure, that I possibly have a heart attack or a stroke, or by the time I am begging to retire, that I'm going to work out of 52 weeks in the year, that my employer is going to be nice enough to give me 2 whole weeks for myself. I mean, it is unsustainable. Can we radically even reimagine how we work? I have always prided myself in being someone that I was like, you can't outwork me, right? And one day I'm like, I'm a hard worker. That's been my mantra. And so about 2 weeks ago, I was laying in bed. I was kind of meditating as I got up in the morning. And I was like, you know what? I think I've been focusing on the wrong thing. My desire is not to be the hardest worker. I want to be the most impactful and the most effective worker. And so what that means, and sometimes we do this. Sometimes I have worked hard and not been effective, but my saving grace was I worked hard. Well, I worked hard, right? And my point is everything is in some ways kind of upside down. Can we reimagine a work week? Can we actually start thinking about, let's think about the means. I'll say this and I'll stop. Let's just imagine, go with me for a minute, you all. Like, let's imagine right now we're working based 40, but 60 hours a week, maybe. Let's even say 40, right? But what we know is that the means of production technology have created vehicles while the production time has almost like been sliced to percentages. So now where you could, let's say you had 100 people to make 1,000 cars in a week, that now because of technology, it only takes 10 people to make 1,000 cars in a week. What do we think? Well, what do we do? Those 90 people, we lay them off, right? We keep the 10 people and make 1,000 cars. Why not keep the 100 people? Instead of working 40 hours a week, those people work 15 hours a week, and those people make more money, and you got 1,000 cars made. I know for some, it's even hard for us to even wrap our brains around that. My point is that we can actually radically reimagine in that circumstance. Why should the means of production be concentrated to a few people, right? When in fact, the technology could create where we could actually have a better life. I would rather people to work 15, 20 hours a week, right, for their livelihood, and spend time with their children, spend time taking care of the elders in their house, going out working in their gardens. What would be so wrong with that? For us to find a way that if there are benefits in the creation of the production, that we're not working people to death, but we're actually using the technology to create a life that we can all live better. But instead, we're actually more stressed. Instead, we're chasing more money. Instead, we're even working even harder with the benefit of technology. I'm raising this just as a point for us to stir up our thinking around. I think it's really important in this moment that we use our imaginations about kind of the political landscape, like the governance landscape in Texas. You know, what are some of the laws that we're responding, but that we're not just constantly responding to what is, but that we're actually creating. We're bringing new ways of being, that we're bringing new ideas to the forefront that actually are going to advance humanity, our family, and make life better for ourselves and others.
That is such a beautiful thing to imagine. And you're right. It is a radical reimagining of what our current status quo is, and I think I love the way that you talk about the pandemic as a useful moment of disruption, right? Because a lot of what you're talking about in terms of these trade-offs and pressures is invisible to us in the day-to-day, right? People are just living, people are just working, they're trying to survive. And this pandemic has made it not just visible, but starkly visible, right? Where suddenly you see elected leaders saying things like, we have to open these businesses, and it will be unfortunate if some people die, but the economy is important. You have people
like think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Your lieutenant governor, I remember, like, he was saying, grandparents should be willing to die for the economy. Really?
Yes.
I thought the economy was for livelihood. I thought the purpose of the economy was for people to live. We have allowed our value system to be so twisted. I am saying, let's get back to humanity. And I think women can take us back. And which is why I was offering even just the thinking about a work week differently. Some may agree, some may not agree, but I don't know if there's any magic in 40 hours a week. Like, what's the magic in 40 hours a week, right? What's the magic in 60 hours a week? The bottom line is there other ways for us to think about being in ways that we can actually be wholesome human beings. How much life we don't know, like this is a life we have. Why would we not want every single human being to have the absolute best experience if this is the only go round we know we have? Maybe there are other go rounds, right? And that's fine, but this is the go round that I know I have right now, right? Why would we not want to do everything in our power for every human being to have the best possible experience on this earth?
Absolutely. And this current moment makes it plain what those choices are and what that looks like. I like to, as we come toward our conclusion time here, one of the things that I like to end on in these conversations is, um, this fight is long, it is hard, it is ongoing, it's draining. And how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you take care of yourself? What do you do to keep yourself going in the fight for progress? And what would you like to share with our audience about it?
Let me say, mighty rivers are filled drop by drop. We have to really realize that if we're just seeking to be transactional, we can go from election to election. We just be transactional. If we're seeking to be transformative, that is a different kind of. We have to dig our heels in and really allow it to go its process. And so, all along the way, we have to really recognize that we're having this human experience as well. And so, part of the reason why you see my background, this virtual background, I always surround myself with a circle of women. I love the men folk, right? Don't get me wrong. I love the men folk and I work with them, but there's something about surrounding myself with a kitchen cabinet, always having a kitchen cabinet of women, that I can actually share my vulnerabilities with, that I can talk through in terms of my strategy. I can also even share my dreams with. I think it's so important for me. It helps feed me. It helps to feed my spirit. I think that it's really important for us to recognize that we're in a relay, that we have to believe that, and we have to have faith and believe, that we were called for a time such as this, that in this moment, I believe that I am supposed to be on this earth in this moment, doing what I'm doing in this moment to help create change. And I have the audacity to believe that the things that I'm doing are actually going to make a difference. I do. Even when I don't see it, even when it feels like it's just so far away, I have to actually just kind of remember that I come from a long history of women, right, who had far less resources than I had. They had far less education and far less opportunities, and yet I'm still talking about them. I'm talking about Harriet Tubman and never met her a day in my life. This is a woman who couldn't read or write, who didn't have any degrees, who didn't have any money, but here we got millions of people on the planet that are talking about her and lifting her up, and actually she's going to be on the lobbying for her to be on, well, I don't know if they're lobbying anymore, I guess it's a decision, on currency in this country. Think about that, right? Who ultimately wound up leading a military to actually free 700 slaves. This is a woman that could neither read or write, right? But there was something about her really understanding her own power and utilizing that power, that here's a woman that had a $50,000 bounty on her head. I don't know anybody that has a $50,000 bounty on their head. Now, that's a lot of money that's a lot of money, even right now. And so, yes, she persisted. And so I think that there's something around, which is really important. I think it's really important for us to do kind of like three things as I'm thinking about, or what I do. The first thing is I have to remember that I am not the first, I will not be the last. And I come from a long history of women who have always pushed the boundaries and been on the vanguard of change. And so what is in them is also in me. And so just because I can't see it, I have to believe that what I am doing is I've got my part of the relay match and I'm moving things forward. The second thing is I also have to understand that as I'm seeking to change the world for my community, that I'm a part of that community. That oftentimes we separate ourselves, out of seeing it like, oh, I'm just going to give and give and give to others, and at the expense of not giving to ourselves. No, I am also one of those people that I want to make life better for. And so it's really important to stop and slow down, and be with me. Like, instead of, I think the first, this past November, I turned 50, and it's so interesting. There's something magical about 50. I actually love being 50. I remember so much of my life, I was obsessed with what was I going to be doing. Now I'm at the place that, who am I being? I'm always asking the question of am I being? Am I being kind? Am I being considered? Am I being Am I being a person of integrity? Like, and so I think it's important for us to get centered in this space of who we are being for ourselves and for others. And then the last thing is what brings you joy, to generate as much joy as possible. If you like to cook, cook, right? Buy the most expensive cookware you can buy and don't feel guilty about it, and cook. If you like to travel. What I think COVID did this for me. What COVID let me know is just the fragility of life as well. I lost so many people during this season, and a very, very good friend who literally had just typed up his notes for a Zoom call, and 10 minutes later he was dead in his living room floor. That I realized just how fragile this life is. And so I'm just going to say the last thing that I do is I surround myself in a village of love and light. And so I always have at least a village of people. There's going to be those fights out there, but you've got to put yourself in this bubble that I think is filled with love and light, with the people that love you, the people that you love, the people who actually lift you up, so that you always have that someone is always feeding into you and you're feeding into them as well.
That is so powerful. I love that. And I that's not just advice for our audience, that's advice for me. So thank you for that. And that image of the relay, that we are here to do our part and then pass it on, having taken it a little bit further.
And affirm yourself. I'm so many people, some of the things that we like to do, people think are silly, or we're like, oh, why should I do this, XYZ? Affirm yourself. Those things that you love to do. If you like to color, buy coloring books, like color. If you like cartoons, if you like making soap, make soap. But create those things that feed your spirit. That is actually a part of the buildup for this political fight. We're so caught up in just doing the politics and not really doing the building up of our humanity. We'll get caught up as well. So I'll just offer that to you. Build up your humanity by doing the things that you love to do. If you like to drink wine, drink much wine. Do the things that you like to do that literally feed you and build you up.
LaTosha, thank you for this conversation. This has been fantastic. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Keep doing the work, and you heard it from LaTosha. Cook, make soap, color, and drink your wine, y'all.
And drink much wine.